For the end of course of testing and assessment in ELT, I will present about assessing listening skills. Contents in my presentation, they are, and the first one is learners' problems with listening. The second is different kinds of listening text. Number 3 is types of listening. Number 4 is find suitable recordings. 5 is the advantages and disadvantages of different types of listening. And the last content is select or design appropriate text. The details of the contents, I will identify what is listening. Listening is the ability to identify and understand what others are saying. This involves understanding a speaker's accent or pronunciation, grammar, and vocabulary, and grasping meaning. An able listener is capable of doing these 4 things simultaneously. First content, the problems that learners have with listening. A learner may encounter many problems with listening. Most of the problems are quality of recorded materials, cultural differences, unfamiliar vocabulary, and length and speed of listening. And the second content is different kinds of listening text. Listening text is divided into 2 types, monologues and dialogues. In monologues is where one person does all or most of the talking, and I have some example of monologue. Public announcements and instructions, public speeches, lecturers, presentations, and monologue have some. Monologues is divided into two types: planned monologues and unplanned monologues. In planned monologue, it includes media, broadcasts, and speeches. It's written to be read, although this is not necessarily always the case. In unplanned monologues, it includes anecdotes, narratives, and extemporization. About dialogues, dialogues is where 2 or more people are talking together. It also divided into 2 types, transactional and interactional dialogues. Transactional dialogues, it refers to trying to obtain or exchange information. So, for example, when we listen to someone giving instructions about how to use a computer program, that is a transactional listening. There are some outstanding features of transactional dialogues. Transactional have an outcome, for example. Transactional have an outcome, for example, buying something in a shop or enrolling in a school. Transactional dialogue occur when one person needs something. The range of language used is relatively limited and reasonably predictable. Transactional dialogues tend to be more formulaic, factual, and objective. The transactional dialogue be conducted for the purpose of information exchange. And there are three examples for transactional dialogues in the screen. About interactional dialogue, it is the kind of social communication that we frequently carry out when we talk to our friends. There are I find out four outstanding feature of interactional dialogues. They are usually interactional dialogues usually less predictable and more wide-ranging. It is to establish or maintain social relationships such as personal interviews or casual conversation role plays. It can be done to fulfill the social interaction to the society. The topic is free and people just produce the talk to involve the community. And I have three examples of interactional dialogues on the screen. Types of listening on the screen. They are reactive listening, intensive listening, responsive listening, selective listening, extensive listening, and interactive listening. The first type is reactive listening. The focus of reactive listening is on the sound, sound heard. The listener is not generating meaning, and the teacher is the model. The only role that reactive listening can play in an interactive classroom is in brief choral or individual drills that focus on pronunciation. For example, a classroom drill which the students try to copy words and phrases that they hear is a reactive. Number 2 is intensive listening. Intensive listening focuses on the form of language. It uses bottom-up skills like student listen for cues in certain choral or individual drills. The teacher repeats a word or a sentence several times to imprint it in the student's mind. The teacher asks students to listen a sentence or a longer stretch of discourse and to notice a specified element such as intonation, stress, a contraction, a grammatical structure, etc. And here is an example of intensive listening. Type number 3 is responsive listening. The focus of responsive listening is on showing understand. In responsive listening, there are short stretches of teacher language designed to elicit immediate responses. The students' talk is to process the teacher talk immediately and to fashion an appropriate reply. On the screen is an example of responsive listening. Type number 4 is selective listening. Selective listening is the focus of selective listening is on picking up important information such as dates, times, locations by ignoring the undesired part of the message. It requires field independence. In selective listening, maybe we listen for specific information like people's name, dates, or certain fact or event. And I have an example of selective listening is listening to an announcement in a train station to find the time and platform of your train. Listen to TV programs. Types number 5 is extensive listening. The focus of extensive listening is on understanding longer text and connecting the ideas of the text. Extensive listening is global understanding of spoken language. It may require the student to invoke their interaction skills like not a note taking or discussion or full comprehension. And it is an example of extensive listening is listen to a 5-minute lecture on the internet and taking notes. Types number 6 is interactive listening. Interactive listening focuses on combining listening with speaking and sometimes other skills as well, like discussion, debate, or role plays. It is discussing with classmates about what kind of present to buy for your English teacher. Content number 4 is find suitable recordings to use for listening. In content number 4, I will separate the main content into two smaller ones. They are locating recordings on the internet and making your own recording. In order to locate recordings on the internet, we should have some consideration to find the recordings. We have to find out the student's English level, to choose the level of listening test and suitable content that teacher wants to test. Next, we have a teacher have to pay attention to the use of the language in the recordings. And the last, a teacher have to pay attention to the speech, which should be clear enough for learners to understand. I have some useful online listening sources that you can find the recording on the internet. The first one is British Council Listening, BBC Learning English, Macmillan English One Stop English, ESL Lab, or New Zealand. English Listening Lesson Library Online. It is ELLLO. With the second content in content number 4 is making your own recordings. Here I have 5 criteria to make your own recording. We should use natural language. It is long enough to produce questions. Right difficulty level, familiar and non-offensive topic, and it is unique. And I have 6 steps to make your own recordings. We should find suitable people, balance the naturalness of the talk according to the learner's level. recording in quiet place. Use an outline instead of the script to sound more realistic. Consider recording video and learn to edit video. Learn to edit is the advantages and disadvantages of different types of listening. I have six common types of listening. The first one is pick out a word or a listening close. The correct tense. Deduce meaning of unknown words from the context. Identify the main ideas. Summarize through speaking or writing. And the last is listen for specific information. Is pick out word or listening close. Here I have two examples of this listening type. Through this type, I find out three outstanding advantages. It is easy to construct, high reliability, and limits guessing. However, there are some disadvantages for this type. It is harder to score and take more time for students to complete. The second type is recognize the correct tense. In the type, students listen to recordings like conversation or short text, then correctly identify the tense of the verb or distinguish the form of the verbs in the recordings. This belong to the intensive listening, and the focus is on the form of the language. Purpose of the type is to show students how to correct forms of verb in different tenses are pronounced and used in a conversation. The method is multiple choice, limited, or multiple choice, limited response, yes or no. On the screen, I have an example of recognize the correct tense. With this example, I find out some advantages and disadvantages in this type. It is for the advantages. This type is suitable for beginners and have students know how to use correct tense in each conversation. However, there is one disadvantage. It is not suitable for intermediate and advanced students. The next type is a deduce meaning of unknown words from context. This type uses the context, the word and sentences surrounding to help you guess that word's meaning. Usually the guesses you make usually the guesses that you make will be accurate enough for you to understand the author's the ideas. Here is an example of deducing meaning of unknown word from the context. Through this example, I find out some advantages of these listening types. Um, it used it used the word parts like roots, prefixes, and suffixes to determine the meaning of an unfamiliar word. It used context clues to confirm the meaning of an unfamiliar word, and it is useful as in this way the listener can understand all the information in a text. However, however, there are a lot of words from the listening test that you don't understand or can miss the word and can't continue getting the information from the listening test. The next the next one is identify the main idea. It is to find the main ideas in the recording. The main idea of an entire text, a speech or conversation, comes at the beginning or the end of lecture. The speaker may signal a main idea through discourse makers. That is, speakers often use certain phrases to mark or emphasize their main idea. The point I want to make or cover here is that the main point is that what I'm trying to show is that. This type have the advantage and disadvantage. For the advantage, it is to train students to grasp the main idea or general information presented in the audio. However, the disadvantages are the main idea is not always clearly stated. It's more difficult to identify a main idea when it is referred or implied. If students get stuck on a detail, a word become on a detail, a word that they don't understand and fail to see the overall ideas. The next is summarize through speaking or writing. Summarize it usually summarize a spoken text by writing specific number of words, or speaking for a specific number of times, like seconds or minutes. Here is an example of summarize through speaking or writing. Through this example of this type, I found some advantages. It is easy to create and administer. It helps to distinguish between learners based on ability to identify words from context, and it allows me to allow teacher to test many skills. However, it is not easy to score. It's time consuming. It's difficult to prepare tests for beginners. It requires many personal skills, and it's easy to cheat. And the last type is listen for specific information. In this type, it usually finding the answer to specific questions, catching concrete information like names, times, places, etc. Example of listening for specific information like get field exercise, true or false exercise, multiple choice exercise. With this listening type, the advantage is it is to develop students' ability to identify and distinguish specific information. It raises students' awareness of strategies to tackle the task, like skim through the question, underline keywords, brainstorm possible answers, and recognize when the information is about to be given. However, when for these listening types, students don't have to understand everything and pay close attention at specific part. Content number 6 is select or design appropriate tasks to assess students for different purposes. In this content, I will separate it into two smaller content. It is listening with a purpose and task and the task types. Listening with a purpose, student listening for main ideas, listening for the details, listening for attitude or opinions, picking out a word, recognizing the correct tense, or deducing the meaning of unknown words from context. About listening for main ideas. Test takers are asked to listen to a speech and summarize the speech in limited words. The purpose is to test the ability to take notes, ability to select relevant key points, ability to comprehend, analyze, and combine information from a lecture and then summarize key points. Number 2 is listening for details. The purpose of listening for detail is to test students' ability to grasp specific information, details that are relevant, important, or necessary. The goal is to help a student obtain the detailed information. Here is an example of this tag. Number 3 is listening for attitude or opinions. The purpose is to test students' ability to listen for what someone is really saying, not what they are literally saying, but what they actually mean. Attitudes, opinions, and feelings can all be conveyed in varying degrees, from a strong disagreement to mild criticism. Advanced students should be able to discern different attitudes and positions, as well as identify how the speaker feels. Number 4 is picking out a word. The test takers are asked to pick out a word from several that sound alike. The purposes of picking out a word is to test the ability to discriminate between distinctive sounds of the target languages, to test the ability to recognize the stress pattern of words, and to test ability to recognize the function of stress and intonation to signal the information structure of utterances. Number 5 is recognizing the correct tense. The test takers are asked to listen to a sentence, recognize the tense, and choose the correct answer. The purpose of recognizing the correct tense is to test the ability to recognize language in spoken language and the ability to use grammar appropriately. And the last is deducing the meaning of unknown words from context. This kind of task is usually a part of listening comprehension. The purpose is to test the ability to deduce words from the context. With the task types, they are multiple choice, dictation, and note completion. With multiple choice tasks, with multiple choice tasks, the purpose is testing learners' ability to understand the main details of 10 short monologues or dialogues. In order to have students prepare for this exercise, teachers can create multiple choice quizzes using online learning platforms such as Quizlet. Teachers use or crop videos from YouTube and design multiple choice questions focusing on the main detail of each dialogue or monologue. With dictation, the purpose is assessing learners' ability to understand an extended audio and transcribe what is heard. In order to have students prepare for this exercise, teachers can have learners use the first play of the audio to adjust the speaker's voices without the need to focus on transcription. Then a teacher have them to transcribe short sections of the audio during the second play. With note completion, the purpose is to assess learners' ability to extract specific information from extended audio. The teacher can have students use the audio transcript to create simple gap-fill activities for learners, with the gaps focusing on more difficult elements of the audio to have students to prepare for this. It is the end of my presentation for this subject. Thanks for listening and watching.